The sun dipped low, painting the garage in hues of orange and gold, casting long shadows across the cold concrete floor. Jack knelt beside the old pickup, grease smudged on his cheek, when he heard a soft, tremulous voice. It drifted in through the cracked window, fragile yet defiant. He turned, seeing her, Lily, her hair a tangled halo, eyes wide with unspilled tears. She sat on a rusting tire, clutching a worn teddy bear, the weight of her world pressing down on her small shoulders. Yet there was warmth in her hum, a haunting melody that wrapped around his heart. His dog, a scruffy mutt named Rusty, lay beside her, ears perked, tail thumping in time with her song. In that moment, amidst the scent of oil and the distant echo of passing cars, two souls began to bridge the gap between silence and healing, one note at a time. Lily stumbled into the dimly lit garage, her heart pounding in sync with the clanking of metal and the sour scent of oil. Shadows danced across the walls, flickering with the buzzing fluorescent lights that buzzed like angry wasps. She hesitated at the threshold, wringing her hands together, the remnants of her childhood clinging to her like an old, tattered blanket. The morning sun tried to break through the grime-covered windows, casting slivers of light onto the concrete floor, highlighting the stark contrasts in her life: light and darkness, warmth and cold. Jack stood sweating over the engine of a weathered pickup truck, his brow furrowed in concentration, but the moment he glanced up, everything in the room seemed to freeze. The girl before him looked like a spectre from another world, her face pale and smeared with dirt, her clothes hanging loosely around her thin frame. He dropped the wrench, sending it clattering to the ground as something inside him twisted at the sight of her, the fragility of her existence striking him like a sharp blow. He had seen many broken things in his life, but none quite like this. She was not just broken, she was lost. Lily's gaze fell to the floor, avoiding his penetrating stare. Memories swirled around her like fallen leaves in the wind, the sound of her aunt's laughter mixed with the crackle of a distant argument. She thought of the day she was handed over, the weight of a dollar bill exchanged for her innocence, the betrayal burying itself deep where her heart should have been. Desperation clung to her like a shadow, and she swallowed hard, trying to push it down. She wanted to scream, to run back to what she knew, but the grasp of her aunt's addiction had dragged her into a new world, one where she was utterly alone. Jack could only watch as she shifted nervously, the way her eyes darted toward the door and back to him, as if weighing her options. The silence stretched between them, thick and heavy with unspoken words. He sensed her fear, the way it wrapped around her like a shroud. It sharpened his instincts. He wanted to reach out, to tell her it would be okay, but he felt a barrier that seemed impossible to breach. He was a mechanic, not a savior, and this was not the life he'd imagined for himself. A flicker of hope ignited in her chest when she noticed Jack's dog lying in the corner, its head resting lazily on its paws. The dog's fur was matted, its eyes wise and kind, and in that moment something softened within her. She took a tentative step forward, drawn by an invisible thread, the pain of her past suddenly muted by the presence of the gentle creature. She knelt slowly, extending a trembling hand, her fingers brushing the dog's coarse fur. It lifted its head, sniffing curiously, and for the first time since she arrived, she felt a pang of connection, not to a person, but to something pure and untainted. Jack watched as Lily's demeanor shifted, her fears momentarily forgotten, as if the act of touching the dog had awakened a long-buried piece of herself. He felt an inexplicable pull toward her, a desire to comfort this wounded girl, but his own history weighed heavily on him. He had loved and lost, had seen the way trust could be crushed like glass beneath the weight of despair. He didn't want to become attached, didn't want to open the door to vulnerability when he felt so frayed himself. As the moments passed, Lily began to hum softly, an instinctive melody that spilled from her lips and enveloped the space between them in an unexpected warmth. The dog responded, tilting its head as if captivated by the sound. Jack could hardly breathe as he absorbed this fragile moment, the sanctuary of her song slicing through the noise of his everyday life. It was beautiful and haunting, a lullaby woven from the threads of sorrow and resilience, and he couldn't help but wonder how someone so young could carry so much weight within her. Yet, as the last notes faded into the air, Jack's heart hardened against the rising urge to engage, to draw her closer. He took a step back, re-establishing the distance that felt safer, the invisible barrier of emotional detachment. He reminded himself that he was just a mechanic, a man used to fixing things, not a protector or a guardian. Lily might have found a moment of solace in her song, but he knew better than to believe it could last. In this world where darkness often triumphed, silence echoed louder than any melody. Lily stood at the edge of the gravel driveway, her breath clouding in the crisp evening air as she studied the weathered house that loomed before her. Jack's home, a modest two-story structure enveloped by sprawling trees, bore the marks of years gone by, peeling paint and an uneven porch that creaked beneath the weight of each nightfall. The silence was hollow except for the rustle of leaves, and she felt the weight of uncertainty pressing against her chest. With a timid glance back at the road she had traveled, she pushed her shoulders back and stepped forward, the soles of her worn sneakers crunching the gravel with each hesitant stride. Inside, Jack unfolded himself from the cramped sofa, the weight of another long day settling on his shoulders like a heavy cloak. The dim light cast shadows across his rugged features, revealing the weariness etched into each line of his face. He didn't expect much of a welcome, but the sight of her, this fragile girl with wild hair that framed her gaunt cheeks, gave him pause. She stood awkwardly in the doorway, a ghost waiting for permission to enter. The remnants of her aunt's life still clung to her like a second skin, sharpening the edges of her vulnerability. "Hey," he managed, the sound heavy in the stillness. It felt foreign to his ears. He swallowed hard, searching her eyes for any hint of welcome. Lily nodded slightly, as if the weight of her past had made it difficult for her to muster the energy for a response. She stepped inside, the threshold crossing like a bridge into the unknown, and Jack glanced down, avoiding the intensity of her stare. They were both too familiar with silence, too hesitant to invite words that might shatter the fragile peace that lingered between them. As dusk settled around them, the home felt like an unfinished painting, strokes of warmth and dimness blending together, waiting for the right colors to complete the picture. Jack turned toward the clutter of tools and car parts that filled the garage, a world he understood. He could drown in the sound of clinking metal and the rumble of engines, a language far more fluent than the unpredictable vibrations of human interaction. Yet, as he moved to the back, he felt her gaze lingering, a weight that pulled him back. "What do you need?" he asked, noticing the way her hands fidgeted, twisting together like vines under pressure. "Do you want something to eat or a blanket?" He was more comfortable getting straight to the point, feeling the tension weave its way through the air around them. Lily shook her head, the motion almost imperceptible, but it was enough to deepen the silence. Jack felt a stirring of frustration, a longing to bridge the chasm formed by their painful histories, but he held back, not quite sure how to navigate the emotional terrain between them. Days turned into weeks, the awkward coexistence becoming a routine draped in unease. Jack busied himself with the mechanical rhythms of life, while Lily took to the corners of the house, reading books she found abandoned on dusty shelves or wandering the trails that snaked through the woods. They passed each other like ships in the night, sharing glances heavy with unsaid things. Jack would come home to the aroma of something simmering on the stove, a small flicker of gratitude igniting in his chest. But they rarely shared a meal together, as if the act of eating might fracture the delicate balance they had unwittingly created. One afternoon, as the sun began its descent and the shadows grew long, Jack found himself in the backyard, the day's chores finally completed. He settled on the steps for a brief moment of peace, watching his dog, a scruffy mutt named Rusty, chase after a butterfly with reckless abandon. The sight tugged at something deep within him. Just then, a sound, a soft, melodious hum, floated through the open window, weaving its way into the cool evening air. It was a sound so tender, so unexpectedly beautiful, that he had to strain to determine its source. Following the sound, he crossed the threshold of the house, heart pounding with an unfamiliar excitement. There, in the kitchen, stood Lily, her voice curling around the notes as she sang. A little shyly but with a newfound confidence, the melody wrapping around Rusty, who lay at her feet, ears perked and eyes sparkling. Jack paused in the doorway, the scene before him a vivid stroke of color against the drab canvas of their life together. Lily's hidden light shone through the cracks of her grief, and for the first time he saw not just the lost girl, but a kindred spirit, a companion whispering hope into the corners of his solitary existence. In that moment, the silence between them shifted, the air thickening with unspoken possibilities. They were two weary travelers drawn together by circumstance, yet here, in the simplicity of a song shared with a dog, both felt the fragile threads of connection beginning to knit themselves, weaving a tapestry of trust, understanding, and the quiet beginnings of something tender. Jack lingered for just a heartbeat longer before clearing his throat, breaking the spell. But now something had changed. Their coexistence was no longer merely survival. It hinted at a fragile promise, one that could finally breathe in the light. Lily woke early each morning, the soft light of dawn spilling through cracked curtains, illuminating the small room she shared with her thoughts. She always started her day by sneaking downstairs, careful not to disturb Jack. The mornings in his garage were sacred, a ritual of oil and metal, the scent of fresh coffee mingling with engine grease. She would tiptoe past the cluttered workbench and the vehicles waiting for repair, a world that felt foreign, yet comforting. With every sunrise, she found herself growing accustomed to this life, if only momentarily, if only to escape the shadows of her past. Jack had made it a point to keep things uncomplicated. His days were filled with the comforting hum of machines and the clatter of tools. But as much as he kept himself buried in work, he couldn't ignore the quiet presence of the girl he had taken in. He noticed her slipping in and out of the garage, her hands tucked in the pockets of oversized sweaters, eyes darting around as if searching for something, or perhaps hiding from something. He was no stranger to the weight of silence, but her presence added a new layer of tension, a frayed edge to his well-ordered existence. With each passing day, Jack's curiosity about Lily deepened. It manifested during the late afternoons when he would catch fleeting glimpses of her lost in thought, or when she hummed softly to herself while sorting through the garage's endless clutter. He found himself drawn to those moments, those sounds that seemed to weave a fragile thread between them, binding their worlds together. Still, he hesitated. The scars of his own past kept him anchored, a reluctance that felt both protective and suffocating. Lily spent hours under the watchful gaze of an aging Labrador, the only creature that seemed to bridge the gap between her and Jack. She would crouch beside the dog, her fingers gently tracing the contours of its fur, whispering secrets only they could hear. It was in these quiet exchanges with the animal that she felt a flicker of safety, something she hadn't known in a long while. But with Jack always nearby, the soft undercurrent of their unspoken bond hung heavy in the air, filled with the tension of uncharted territory. One rainy afternoon, the sound of raindrops tapping against the metal roof drowned out the silence that had become a familiar companion. Lily's voice broke through the noise, hesitant at first, then growing bolder as she sang softly to the dog, her melody almost haunting. Jack paused in his work, tools frozen mid-air, as her voice wrapped around him like a warm blanket. It was raw, untouched by cynicism, and it struck a chord deep within him, awakening feelings he had buried long ago. He forced himself to look away, the weight of her vulnerability gnawing at him. He wondered whether her song was a balm for her hidden pain or an echo of her past, something he couldn't fully fathom. As she sang, Jack's heart twisted, caught between the conflicting emotions of wanting to protect her and fearing what might surface if he allowed himself to get too close. He recalled the shadows in her eyes, the way her laughter sometimes seemed strained, like a smile painted over a wound. The resolve that had once felt so steadfast began to tremble, and he couldn't shake the unease that came with curiosity. What lay beneath the surface of her quiet demeanor? When the rain finally subsided, Lily turned to find Jack standing just outside the garage, his face unreadable. The air thickened with an unfamiliar tension. She felt exposed, vulnerable in a way that made her want to retreat back into herself. "Did you hear me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, as if she had just been caught sharing a secret. Jack nodded, his features softening for an instant before the familiar mask of stoicism returned. "You sing well," he replied, trying to keep his tone neutral, but the compliment hung in the air between them, electric and charged. Lily didn't respond right away, her heart racing under Jack's gaze. In his eyes, she saw something shift, a momentary glimmer of recognition, perhaps even understanding. But the moment passed like a wisp of smoke, leaving behind a haze of uncertainty. "I wasn't trying to intrude," she finally said, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, her words laced with an edge of vulnerability. Jack remained silent, battling the urge to bridge the distance between them, caught between the desire to know her and the fear of what that might entail. As the days rolled on, their routines began to intertwine more. The garage, with its rusted parts and dull clang of machinery, became a backdrop to a burgeoning yet tentative understanding. Yet, the emotional friction remained palpable, a constant reminder of the barriers they both carried. Lily continued to find solace in her songs, and Jack remained the unyielding sentinel of his own heart, a mechanic tending to the engines around him while wrestling with the intricacies of his own feelings. In their world filled with grease and uncertainty, hope lingered, fragile yet persistent, as they both awaited the moment the melody of their lives might finally harmonize. Lily sat on the faded couch in Jack's cluttered garage, the hum of the tools and the scent of motor oil wrapping around her like a warm blanket. She watched him work, his hands deft and sure as he tightened bolts and adjusted pipes. He moved with a rhythm, blissfully unaware of the chaos swirling in her heart. Every clatter and thump echoed her own doubts, echoes of the life she had left behind, of the aunt who had sold her, of a past drenched in shadows. As Jack bent down to examine the broken-down engine, a sliver of sunlight streamed through the garage door, illuminating the dust particles dancing in the air. Lily's fingers tapped nervously against her thigh, and she felt an insatiable longing propelling her to reach out. But the weight of her scars felt heavy, anchoring her to the couch. What could she offer him? Her laughter was rusty, her spirit dulled from neglect. She bit her lip, a bitter taste rising in her throat. "Lily," Jack's voice broke into her thoughts, gentle yet firm. "You all right?" She lifted her gaze, meeting his eyes, the kind of blue that felt like a summer sky. For a fleeting moment, the warmth of his concern washed over her like a soothing balm. Yet fear threaded through that warmth, whispering that she could not be the girl he thought her to be. She swallowed hard, the words slipping through her mind like grains of sand, but none landed on her tongue. "I'm fine," she replied, the words heavy with the weight of her untruth. Jack raised an eyebrow, skepticism flaring across his features. He turned back to the engine, and the tension in the air thickened. She could almost hear the cogs of his mind turning. He was too observant, too good at reading between the lines. And yet, how could she allow him to see the vulnerability laid bare beneath her tough exterior? Days turned into weeks, and Lily found herself enveloped in the rhythm of Jack's life, a sanctuary of tools, grease, and soft melodies that drifted through the air. They spent evenings in comfortable silence, punctuated only by the occasional laughter that broke over shared meals. But one night, a storm rolled in, weaving darkness across the sky, and an unsettling silence crept into their sanctuary. The wind howled, rattling the garage door as if echoing Lily's unease. Jack sat on a stool, his face illuminated by the flickering light of a nearby bulb. The ghost of worry passed over his features. She could see it was weighing on him. "Lily," he started, voice barely above a whisper, "there's something I need to know. Are you really okay?" The vulnerability in his tone pierced her heart. He was looking to her for reassurance, but it was as if the walls she had built were suddenly crumbling, brick by brick. "I told you I am fine," she managed to say, feeling the anger rise, anger at her situation, at herself, and at the words that escaped her throat so easily, but felt like knives. Jack's eyes dropped to the floor, disappointment etching lines across his brow. She could see he wanted to help her, to reach into the depths of her soul and pull her back from the ledge. But the thought of letting him in frightened her more than the ghosts of her past. Fine isn't a feeling, Lily. It's just an easy word to hide behind. His voice was low, and she could hear the hurt lacing his words. In that moment, the understanding dawned. He was not just offering her a place to stay, but a lifeline. She felt the swell of emotions rising within her, and before she knew it, tears spilled over, a dam she didn't even know she had constructed, broken, wide open. Jack didn't flinch. Instead, he moved closer, offering solace without words. He understood. In the quiet that enveloped them, Lily found herself trembling, not from fear or shame, but from the release of burdens she had carried for too long. As she gasped for breath through her tears, something beautiful emerged in that shared vulnerability, a fragile connection beginning to take root, ready to bloom under the light of their newfound honesty. The sun dipped low in the sky, casting a golden hue across the cluttered garage. Jack's hands were covered in grease, the faint whiff of oil lingering in the air as he tightened the last bolt on an old engine. Lily sat on a creaky stool, her gaze flitting between Jack's focused expression and the pile of forgotten tools strewn about the floor. It was a familiar scene for Jack. He found solace in the rhythmic clatter of metal and the intoxicating scent of machinery. But today felt different. Today, Lily's presence crackled with an energy he couldn't ignore. Her feet swung back and forth, toes barely grazing the concrete, a gentle reminder of the childlike spirit still flickering within her. Unbeknownst to her, the whispers of her childhood lingered just beneath the surface, battling the weight of her circumstances. Jack sensed it, that fragile hope, as Lily's gaze drifted to the window, where the evening light painted the walls with warmth. He had seen that look before, the yearning for something more, something beyond the confines of reality. And in that instant, he felt the walls he had built around himself begin to crumble. "What are you thinking about?" Jack asked, wiping his hands on a rag, the rough fabric catching on his calloused fingers. He stepped closer, his posture relaxed yet attentive, his body an unspoken promise of safety and understanding. It was an invitation for her to share, to peel back another layer of the mask she wore so carefully. Lily shifted her eyes to meet his, unguarded for just a heartbeat. She hesitated, her voice barely above a whisper, wondering what it's like to be free. The weight of her words hung between them, thick and tangible. Jack felt the air shift, the very atmosphere charged with the mingling of their hidden dreams. It was as if those simple words had sparked something deep within him, a kindred connection that resonated through the clutter of their lives. For the first time, he glimpsed the possibility that they were not so different after all. Jack knelt beside her, his rough hands resting on the edge of the stool. "What would freedom look like for you?" he asked, his voice low and steady. He was surprised by the tenderness that slipped into his tone. Lily's brow furrowed as thoughts tumbled through her mind, images of skies unbound, footsteps echoing on open roads, and laughter that rang without fear. She hesitated, the shadows of doubt creeping back, but she pushed them aside, compelled by the warmth of Jack's gaze. Maybe it would be singing again. she finally confessed. Just letting go, feeling the music. The words spilled out of her, unguarded, like a dam breaking after years of confinement. Jack's heart raced at the thought, the image of her voice soaring through the air, unrestrained and wild. He had heard her hum softly in the garage, notes slipping effortlessly through her lips, but the idea of her singing, truly singing, ignited a flicker of inspiration deep within him. An idea began to form, something instinctual that transcended the chaos of their lives. "Why don't you sing for me?" Jack suggested, his voice a gentle nudge. "Just once. I think it would sound beautiful." He watched as her eyes widened in disbelief, uncertainty flickering across her face. For a moment, time stood still. The shadows of her past and the weight of her fears clashed against the hope that threaded its way through the space between them. They shared a silence thick with anticipation, and then, with a deep breath, Lily began to hum. The notes were soft at first, delicate little wisps of sound that floated through the air like fragile wings. Jack leaned in closer, his heart swelling with each note, feeling the infectious joy that radiated from her spirit. The hum transitioned into a melody, a gentle lullaby that resonated within the confines of the garage as Jack's dog perked up, tail wagging in delight, drawn to the beauty of her voice. As Lily continued, Jack felt something shift inside him. The walls he had built against vulnerability crumbled further. In that moment, surrounded by the scent of oil and the lingering notes of her song, he knew they were forging a connection that neither of them had anticipated. The world outside faded away, leaving only the echo of her voice and the soft, unwavering companionship of the dog beside him. A bond began to form, fragile yet resolute, as they shared their truths beneath the dim light of the garage, both finally daring to dream of freedom rooted in each other. Lily sat on the edge of Jack's workbench, her legs swinging nervously as she watched him. Oil-stained hands moved efficiently over an old truck engine, but her thoughts swirled chaotically. The hum of the garage felt both comforting and suffocating. Each clank of metal resonated with the weight of the decisions she had to make. Each vibration echoed the fear of her past. Jack glanced her way briefly, amusement in his eyes, and the warmth of his gaze set her heart racing. The dog lay curled at Jack's feet, his tail thumping lazily against the concrete. Every time she shifted, she wanted so desperately to reach down, to scratch behind the dog's ears and feel that simple joy. But the heaviness in her chest kept her anchored to the bench. She recalled the last time she tried to care for something and how it had slipped through her fingers, just like everything else. Her aunt's laughter rang in her ears, mixed with the haunting words of betrayal. "You're no good, Lily. You'll just end up like me." Jack's voice chimed in, breaking the cycle of her thoughts. "You want to give it a try?" He gestured toward the engine, and for a split second, hope sparkled like freshly polished chrome. Lily shook her head, the words dry on her tongue. He didn't know. He didn't understand the weight of her failures, the way every attempt felt like a cruel joke. The air between them crackled with tension, and she could feel him studying her, sensing the storm brewing beneath her calm facade. "Lily," his voice was gentle but firm, cutting through her mental fog. "You can't just sit there. You've got potential, you know that? Just like that engine, all it needs is a little elbow grease." She looked away, the lump in her throat growing as resentment mixed with sorrow. The conflict raged inside her, the desire to be seen and to retreat into the shadows. She wanted to scream and run, but here in this moment, Jack's unwavering confidence in her felt like an anchor. "Why do you even care?" Her voice trembled, unmasking a vulnerability she hadn't intended to share. She regretted it instantly, wishing she could pull the words back into her chest. Jack straightened, his posture shifting as he fully turned to face her, the humor draining from his expression. "Because I see you, Lily. I see how hard you try, even when you think you don't matter." Each word wrapped around her like a lifeline, tugging on the frayed edges of her heart. Silence enveloped them, thick and heavy, broken only by the soft panting of the dog. The barrage of thoughts crashed against one another, and for the first time she felt the grip of fear loosening. Maybe there was space here for her to exist, not just in the shadows, but in the light of Jack's faith. It terrified her, but the idea of stepping forward, of embracing even a fraction of that trust, sent a thrill coursing through her. What if she could be more than the girl sold by her aunt? What if she could be someone deserving of love? Jack raised his brow, waiting for her response, and she felt the tension thicken once more. "I don't want to be a burden," she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. "I don't want to ruin what you have." The confession hung in the air, raw and unfiltered. Jack stepped closer, the warmth of his presence enveloping her like a shield. "You could never be a burden to me, Lily. I believe in you. You just have to believe in yourself." Tears prickled at her eyes, an eruption of emotions she thought long buried suddenly rising to the surface. She looked at the dog, who seemed to sense her turmoil and instinctively felt an urge to reach out. As she bent down, Jack's gaze softened, and the moment crystallized in the air between them. In that quiet space, Lily found a flicker of hope, a glimpse of the girl she could become, one who could fight against the darkness instead of letting it consume her. And as she scratched behind the dog's ears, the simple act sowed seeds of courage. All at once, she felt the urge to sing, an impulse so strong it felt unreal. Hesitantly, she began humming a soft tune, her voice trembling but growing steadier with each note. Jack watched her, a gentle smile creeping across his lips, and in that moment, surrounded by the tools of a mechanic's trade and the warmth of understanding, Lily began to realize that perhaps, just perhaps, she was ready to take a step into the light. The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting golden hues across the worn-out driveway where Jack's humble garage stood. It was the kind of evening that offered a sense of calm, a momentary escape from the chaos of life. Jack wiped his hands on a rag, the grease smudging his worn jeans, but today he didn't mind. Today felt different. There was a hushed energy in the air. As he glanced toward the open door, he heard her, the soft, lilting sound of Lily's voice, intertwined with the gentle rustling of the leaves around them. Inside the garage, Lily sat cross-legged on the cool concrete, her fingers nestled in the fur of Jack's dog, Buddy. She was oblivious to her surroundings, lost in the melody that flowed from her lips. For the first time since Jack had taken her in, the shadows that once cloaked her seemed to lift. She sang sweetly, a song not of despair, but of hope, as Buddy rested his chin on her knee, utterly captivated by her warmth. Jack felt his heart swell with something unnameable, a mixture of pride and a longing for both of them to find their way. He watched her, entranced, feeling the weight of his own solitude shift ever so slightly. Lily, with her hair falling across her eyes, had a way of enveloping their little world in light. It dawned on him in that moment how much she had changed, not just him, but herself. The girl who once limped through his door, burdened by the weight of her past, was now a vision of resilience. She had found a safe haven, a place where laughter mingled with the rhythm of the tools and the warmth of companionship. Yet, even amidst the harmony, Jack was acutely aware of the darkness that loomed just beyond their bubble. He had taken on the role of her guardian, vowing to shield her from the tides of her aunt's addiction, but he felt the inevitable pull of reality creeping closer. He was reminded of the phone calls, the late-night whispers that set Lily on edge, the fear that her past might come rushing back to claim her, shattering the fragile peace they had built together. Just then, as if sensing the unsaid thoughts swirling in the air, Lily stopped singing. Her head lifted and her eyes locked onto Jack's, piercing through the veil of his apprehension. "Jack, what if my aunt comes back?" The question hung heavily, suspended between them, and for a fleeting moment, the music around them faded. In that silence, Jack's heart raced. He wanted to shield her from every possibility of pain, to tell her that everything would always be all right. But the truth felt heavier than any promise he could give. Jack crouched beside her, meeting her gaze with the fullness of his own uncertainty. "We'll face it together," he said, his voice steadier than he felt. She nodded, yet in her eyes he saw the fear still lurking beneath her brave facade. Jack's chest tightened as he recalled the nights of worry, the close calls, and the moments where he couldn't protect her from the whispers of her past. He felt the swell of emotion. His life had become entwined with hers in a way he never anticipated, and the thought of losing her was suffocating. Just then, they heard the crunch of gravel and the sound of tires rolling to a stop outside the garage. Jack's heart dropped to his stomach as Lily's eyes widened. The anticipation of dread was palpable, and he could see it flickering across her face. Without thinking, Jack jumped to his feet, urgency propelling him toward the door. But before he could reach it, Lily stood up, a surprising fire igniting within her. "No," she whispered fiercely, stepping forward, her voice stronger than he had ever heard it. "I won't hide anymore." In that moment, everything shifted. Lily had shed the remnants of her past with a defiant declaration. She turned to him, her eyes glistening with determination, a stark contrast to the fear that had once consumed her. Jack felt an overwhelming surge of pride as she took a deep breath, ready to confront whatever came through that door. The girl he had taken in was gone. In her place stood a fiercely independent spirit, ready to reclaim her life. Jack realized then that their roles had transformed. She was no longer the girl needing saving. She was a warrior, and he was her steadfast ally, standing beside her as they faced their shared reality head-on. As the door slowly opened, revealing a figure from the past, Jack felt a resolute strength in the space between them. Whatever unfolded next, they would navigate it together, no longer defined by their histories, but by the promise of new beginnings. Jack reached for Lily's hand, their fingers entwined as they faced the unknown, poised to confront the storm with unwavering resolve. Lily knelt in the dusky glow, her fingers tracing the soft fur of the dog nestled at her feet. Jack stood a few paces away, the fading light casting long shadows that danced between them like whispers of the past. The air was thick with the scent of earth and blooming jasmine, the world around them fading into a serene hush. Her voice emerged gently, a melody weaving through the tranquil evening, each note a brushstroke against the canvas of their shared silence. The dog raised its head, eyes soft with recognition, as if the song were a promise wrapped in warmth. Jack closed his eyes, letting the music wrap around him like a comforting embrace, the weight of his solitude lifting thread by thread. As she sang, he took a step forward, the ground crunching softly beneath his boots, a sound that resonated like a heartbeat between them. He knelt beside her, his hand resting lightly on the dog, their bond palpable in the stillness. Their eyes met, and in that moment, the world felt whole. In the symphony of twilight, a promise lingered, shimmering in the cool breeze. Healing is found not in words, but in the simple act of being together.